How does an experienced webinar marketer and producer create connection, get attendees to convert, and even use breakout rooms? Well, hello and welcome to Connection to Conversion, building a webinar program from the ground up. My name is Roger Corville, and welcome to another episode of V2's Thought Leader Conversation Series, brought to you by the crew at Virtual Venues, the crew with a combined 163 years of experience bringing you virtual and hybrid event production. But today's not about us, and I'm really excited to actually have a conversation with somebody that I've never had a conversation with outside of social media. Lauren Sawyer is the webinar program manager at Vendor, the no-brain SaaS solution that pays for itself. We'll come back around to that at some point. Started her career in broadcast TV, produced 50-plus customer success webinars at Outreach, now building the marketing webinar program at Vendor from scratch, and loves to talk about an idea she calls connection to conversion. Welcome, Lauren.
Yes, thank you so much, Roger. It's great to be here.
Helps if I push the button at the right time, you know?
It's all good.
Hey, tell us, fill in a couple gaps there. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'm a producer, first and foremost. Like you said, I started my career in news, so I'm a Midwest kind of gal. I'm from Nebraska, so I had the great pleasure of starting my career with Hearst Television. If you can believe this, they converted a Burlington train station into their newsroom. Yeah,
I
it
love
was a
that.
huge investment in the community. They really brought back to life this train station with, keeping the historic parts of it, using maybe old doors as artwork, some of the graffiti from when it was vacant, and really like brought back this part of the history of the town. Like my grandma remembers saying goodbye to her dad going to the war there.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a tremendous honor to be part of their morning news production crew and help open 7 Burlington Station in downtown Omaha, Nebraska. So that was the start of my career. I just jumped right in out of college. I had a media fellowship and then I went straight into news. And then given that fellowship I had in New York City, I thought to myself, that allowed this door to kind of be there of all these other career opportunities,
Right.
that, as much as I was extremely grateful for working at KTV, it was like the reason I got into journalism was this station that really had made an impact in my life. Um, I thought, like, I don't think I can forgive myself if I don't give this whole New York thing a chance. So I moved back and I founded in-house audio and video production at the Trade Association for Local TV News, which is TVB. And that's how I became friends with the great folks at V2, using them for some webinars. That was kind of my first foray into TV to webinars. And then I moved from the news industry into tech, working at Outreach and customer success. And here I am now in tech at Vendor learning marketing. So it's been a fun ride.
Oh, thank you. And just for those listening, this is to me the power of people, right? So we did one of these with Erica Mackey. It posted on LinkedIn. Lauren made a comment. I saw Lauren's comment. I looked at her profile and went, oh, you look interesting. And this was before I realized you had any connection to the crew at V2. And so, and here she is. So before we get to walking through building it all out from the ground up, tell us what you mean by connection to conversion.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that is a message or kind of a philosophy that I have been using as I build the program, and it lends itself to a lot of marketing best practices. So instead of starting in marketing best practices, we start with a focus on the person who's attending. What kind of experience do we want them to have? Are they going to be downloading software? Maybe not great. We want browser based. Again, that's going to help you with your conversion because they're not having to download something. Do we want them to feel heard in a webinar? Like they've been able to interact. We've had a conversation with them. Maybe someone like a sales rep who previously talked to them is now following up with a DM and saying, oh, great to see you. Do you have any questions? So taking that personal approach. So instead of just focusing everything around your numbers of driving people to an event, collecting their information, following up, what is like the thread of an experience and a relationship that connects all of those touch points?
I Well, I mean, obviously, when you and I were chatting about kind of how to focus our time today and talking about building from the ground up, to me, that resonated kind of for two reasons, right? I mean, October is going to be 24 years in this space for me, but one of the
Love it.
distinctions of this medium, unlike television, is that ability to have a real time connection with your audience,
Hmm.
right? And it's something I've been preaching for a long time, in part because, and I think you're dead on, in part because, for instance, you can go anywhere and find a dentist who's qualified to fill the hole in your tooth. But who do you
Hmm.
go back to, right? Somebody that you make a connection with.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I just think building trust is really something I learned working in local news, the value of trust. Who do we trust for our news? It's probably the news anchor who lives in your community.
mm,
And so when we're making a decision about a product and trying to learn something, we still want that to be from someone we trust. But how do you earn trust? It would be by caring about someone and getting to know them, in my opinion, and then helping them find a solution that works best for them, which is kind of where I was so interested in working at Vendor because we'll talk about their mission a little bit.
yeah, well, in fact, that's a great transition. We, we will not get done with our conversation without talking about breakout rooms and
That's true.
marketing because, honestly, nary the twain shall meet in the broader universe, and I love that. But let's start with that. What does vendor do, and who do you target, and how did you decide that this was the medium or the approach for going after them?
Yeah, you bet. So, vendors on a mission to fix sales, software sales. I think maybe being in the webinar space, you could have experienced this yourself, Roger, getting quotes from different software companies. And you might be kind of scratching your head a little bit about where these numbers are coming from and where the discounts are coming from. And, that whole situation of, is this really fair and how do I find that out? And so vendor is trying to solve for that software buying, like the difficulty of buying software by being a trusted advisor using data to give you unbiased information for those purchasing decisions. And then the process itself is really tricky, getting all the security and legal reviews. So we have a feature that helps you with that workflow to standardize it. And then we also have an in-house buying team. And if you can believe this, they've been trained by a former FBI hostage negotiator. So I'm not saying our buyers are going to hold anyone hostage or talk out of a hostage situation. Thankfully, software is not that insane. But that's some pretty serious training. So it's
Yeah,
pretty cool that we have an in-house team that can help with those pricing conversations. So
I'm going to keep saying the word exclamation point, but just in case someone here doesn't even realize some of all those soft costs that go into that. I mean, 23 years ago, I had a client that we would all know, American Express, and they literally, my buyer there told me that she was charged internally back $75,000 for the security review. This is 23 years ago, and they flew a team, check out our data centers, and on and on and on, right? And so that process can be cumbersome, and therefore what you're talking about could radically, I would imagine, transform both the timing and the cost of the soft costs and impacts of that kind of thing. That's amazing.
yeah, we
So,
hope so.
well, so tell me what the situation when you showed up. What was the context that you came into?
Yeah, so we're doing a new thing. We're the first people in the space. And I mean, I remember the first time I heard about Vendor, I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad someone thought of this. I had no idea there could possibly be a better way to procure and manage software. And so, a lot of what we need to do as a company is create awareness that there even is a solution to this giant problem, and then educate people about what that could look like for them. And so that actually is going to bring us right to breakout rooms. Is there's only so much you can do in a one to many format.
Right.
It has value. It's great to drive people there, create different content that can touch on a lot of different information that people need. But at the end of the day, the questions you're answering in Q&A through the chat are probably going to be pretty generic so everybody can get the most benefit from that experience.
Right.
So that next level of engagement and where we get more personal would be the breakout room. Similar to what you've seen in a Zoom breakout room, maybe a little more branded depending on your software. So that's something that's like critical for me that I look for in webinar software. It has to have a breakout capacity. And that's where you can have the more intimate conversations with people on camera. And that's where we get someone going, I have a company with 150 people. We're not that big. Like, we're still growing in the software we're using. Like, could that even help me? And it's like, yeah, oh my gosh, great. I would love to tell you how this can help you. And now we can really dive into that and have a real conversation as
Right.
opposed to just everything is in like generics.
Right. And whatever someone asks, to your point, in a one or few to many, you're answering something that you think is going to be of the most value to the most people. And that's not wrong. But when someone asks a question, even if it's one of those down in the weeds corner case kinds of questions, that's what's important to them, right? Oh, what about on
Mhm.
the third Tuesday of the month when you're dealing with a Hungarian shoe retailer? That kind of thing. And that's what's important to them, even if you don't want to take the time to answer that in the broad sense. So when you landed at Vendor, did they already have a platform? Were you in the process of looking for one?
So that's been a ride, a journey. They had kind of started with Zoom webinar. We moved into a platform called Welcome that they had used for all hands. And now we're on Splash and still kind of exploring more of a TV format. So we'll see. Lots of iterating going on. So I think what's consistent is always making sure people learn something no matter what software we're using. And also, the ease of access and engaging, like what are the different functionalities from chat or upvoting questions. And then again, making sure that we're helping people. So like you said, those kind of in the weeds questions, we can't get to them first, but I always really hope that the value someone came seeking, we can provide. So that kind of gives us that more open-ended format to get to those types of requests. And if nothing else, we can always follow up.
Well, right. And oftentimes sales and marketing are enough disconnected so that when in a way that it doesn't have to be, right? In fact, there's nothing better
Mhm.
than equipping your sales team to go to follow up and go, hey, Julie, in the webinar, you asked this question. Did your question get answered appropriately? You got this warm entry as opposed to just going, hey, I saw that you attended the webinar. And when your
Yeah,
answer is like,
so
no, if you looked at your stats, you'd realize that I registered, but I didn't attend or whatever.
mhm. So I'm really glad you brought that up. That's something that's super important to me. Yeah, why I just kind of think, call me crazy, why do you want to only be on a cold call when you could be having a call with someone you met? And so we do have the sales team attend, and then they can follow up directly with the people who ask questions and be like, hey, great to speak with you again, following up on your question. And, that really helps us have a conversation that's geared toward them and not making people go through that stress that I think we've all experienced of reintroducing yourself at every stage of an sales funnel. So
Right.
hopefully make it a little more of, just connecting everything together.
Yeah. Can't tell you how many times I've gotten a cold call and somebody asks a question and I'm like, did you even read the front page of my website? So back to you've landed thinking through platforms. Talk about how that intersects with other systems or processes when it comes to going, okay, how are we managing and tracking data? Or where does this touch other soft processes? Did you have to deal with both technology and people, if not politics, of kind of putting it all together?
Yeah, there's definitely a component of making sure all the pieces fit together. So, where is outreach coming from? Is it marketing? Is it sales? How do those systems talk to each other? Really, the most important integration is probably with Salesforce. Our sales team needs to know who registered, who attended, who viewed on demand. And so, just like you said, the goal isn't to be, the all knowing, we're spying on your information. It's to give that personalized experience. So when we're
Right.
following up, we know what the action was. We're not guessing, we're not making people re explain something to us. And so, yeah, with the synchronicity between any kind of communications that go out to the sales team, very important.
Along the way, what went wrong?
That's a great question. Um, what's coming to
Nothing
mind?
went wrong. It was unicorns and rainbows.
You know what? It's okay. When things go wrong, it is just a chance to learn. And here's a great story for you. The latest software we were putting into place had not used live yet. And so I requested a person to do tech support, much like V2 does. I do miss those days to an extent of having the backup tech support. So I was not paid to say this, but happy to say it. Um, and I said, I'm not going to do the first session without some tech support. I've prepped to as much as I possibly can, but as we all know, you don't know what you don't know. And so I'm like, it's just safe than sorry. And so I got to the call with the tech support the day before a webinar with like 15 presenters because we had all these extra subject matter experts joining for breakouts. So that's where our presenter count really ticks up. And it's the day before the webinar for the run through. Thankfully, I logged in a half an hour before the run through, and no one could see or hear me. So it took 33 minutes to troubleshoot. And so my run through did start a smidge late, but I was able to send the tech support over and say, you know what, Lauren's on her way. We're getting this figured out. In the meantime, this is what we're going to do to start testing the tech for everyone else. And then we got that figured out. And so thank goodness to have had that backup line because I really don't know what I would have done. It took the entire, half an hour we would have had scheduled to figure it out. And we would have been in under 24 hours out from a webinar with 15 presenters needing to get everyone prepped. So I think the lesson there is definitely over prepare. There's really no shame in it. It was honestly almost a little embarrassing for me to have to be like, I'm supposed to be the expert, but I really want someone on this call as a backup. And then in all of our notes, it became this was absolutely necessary. Good thing we did this. We're going to do this as a standard practice.
I appreciate the voice of experience and honestly, I want to compliment you. I mean, any one of us, and I'm going to speak to our listeners here right at the moment, as by way of complimenting Lauren. There's no way you could put a playbook together that accounts for every contingency. There's some part of experience that comes from, yep, been there, done that. I know what it's like to be working with a presenter and have a backhoe go through the fiber outside the street, in the street outside their building. And now what do we do? And so if there's one thing that I just want to share with you, listeners, maybe hit rewind and go back and listen to what Lauren just said. There is some part of just going through the process that helps you not only know which buttons you're going to push, but what do I do when? And that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Lauren, along the way, how is there, that was kind of the, oh my gosh, first time out of the chute. Along the way, what has developed or evolved as you've kind of like started to find those nuances or refine what you're working on?
That's a great question too. So what I'm thinking about a lot right now is the extended lifespan of a webinar. So I was playing with some analytics today and I found out that in less than a month since my last webinar, we have more on demand views than we had registrants for the live event. So I think that's a really interesting opportunity with the way that viewing is changing to know that when you spend all this time and energy putting together a live event, there is great value in helping people and being there to engage with them, but also think about the longevity of that message and who you can be helping along the way and how to keep getting that message out to people who haven't heard it yet. I mean, just because that webinar was in January doesn't mean that people can't learn about negotiation tactics.
Right.
That's still relevant. And so if people are showing up for a long form video like that, it makes me think what are other ways we can continue to leverage that because we haven't done a ton of advertising around it. And so I have put together like a sales sequence, sales cadence, whatever you call it in your software, to promote the on demand. And we haven't used it yet, but I'm really excited to go back to my team and be like, look, people are finding value in this. As you need content to reach out to prospects and you're trying to do the value based selling, we want to add value at every touch point. You can do that with an on demand recording. You don't need to be stuck in the mind frame of it already happened. It doesn't have value anymore.
That is a really interesting observation. I know that one of the things that we've seen in the behind the scenes metrics, and we kind of have the benefit of kind of being behind the scenes for lots of clients, is kind of this tension between how do I get people to show up live? Because there's something unique that happens when you show up live, right? Particularly if you're having personal conversations, breakouts, that can't be mimicked in a recording. And yet, what you just described is that live event is also an authoring event, meaning you're authoring content for subsequent consumption. And I know there are some industry segments. I've worked with some clients where their post-event consumption is off the charts. And so they actually begin gearing how they do produce their live event with that in particular thing in mind. And I've also seen the reverse to be true, which is someone who goes, no, we really need people to show up to our live event. That's the secret sauce. What we deal with is people who have been enculturated by marketers, broadly speaking, going, please, 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 please register for our event. And if you don't attend, we'll send you the recording. And they're not communicating that there is unique value to showing up live. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's an interesting observation. I would really love to hear, maybe even have you back sometime and hear how that evolves for you and what you find with regard to, because to me, it's not an either or, it's a both. They're both part of your arsenal.
Yeah, basically the messaging just shifts. When you're promoting something in advance, you're heavily focusing on the live. And then once you have that content created, and that's a great point, Roger, about an authoring event. That's a rule for me, is if we do not have a level of thought leadership in a webinar that could lend itself to an additional piece of content, be it a podcast, be it a blog post, we didn't do our jobs. Like, people should be learning something new. Like, it's like, if they could read our website and know this information, then why were we spending all this time and energy to send them to a webinar? Like, we need to be adding value. And so, there's the value to attending live. And then once that opportunity has passed, we switch to the value we created that they could gain from going on demand. And so a little tip for everyone watching is, the on-demand promotions, we would include time codes of the highlights, because now you're seeing in real time, I suppose, what really is there for you. And if you didn't have the time to watch all of it, now you're going to jump to those bookmarks and you're going to get those best tidbits, and it's still helping you. So that's been a successful strategy.
Just out of curiosity, given the near universal absence of the use of breakout rooms in marketing oriented events, did you have people who would show up and just sit there, expect that they were just going to passively sit there and multitask, and now all of a sudden you're inviting them into a breakout? Describe that process in a little more detail. How did you get them? How did you take them from an expectation of I'm just going to sit here and passively watch it like television to, oh, you want to talk to me?
It's a great question. So I can tell you that there's quite the drop off of people who do not attend the breakouts, but it's okay, because it's like the people who want to be there are there. And
well, that's probably its own form of qualification, I would imagine. Keep going.
Yeah. And then from there, people have to opt in. We don't just like all of a sudden your camera's on and you're in a breakout room. Like, there's a prompt that comes on screen. You go to a landing page, you select your breakout based on a topic you're interested in. There's maybe 2 or 3 to 4 options. And so you're making a conscious decision that this is a conversation you now want to be a part of. So luckily, no one's just all of a sudden showing up on camera. We wouldn't do that. And then, yes, so as much as we say, discussion, discussion, discussion. I'm like, please say this is a breakout discussion. There should be no promotional materials that say session.
Mm.
That does get lost in translation a little bit. And so, but I just am willing to roll with it at this point. I'm like, just see if you can get people talking about what they need and see if you can help them. Like, I don't want to overcomplicate everything with a slide deck, just like we're not doing here today. Like,
Preach
just
it,
see
sister.
if the conversation can make a difference.
Right. I know. It's one of the paradoxes of selling, right? I have so much to say, and yet I'm so much better off if I shut my mouth and let you talk.
Give and take.
Other key learnings along the way?
Let's see here.
I know that's kind of open-ended, but hey, we're just having a cup of coffee and
I would say just like never stop learning. Sounds a little cliche, but like every week I take a demo, I meet a new person, here we are having this conversation. Like this webinar marketing is really growing right now with the advent of really needing more and more virtual touch points and what can be done with it. I don't think we've even seen so much of the potential. And so I think anyone who works in webinar marketing, it's a really exciting opportunity to be a leader because it's not one of those things that everybody has a playbook for. So that's really exciting to me.
To drill in on one thing we were just talking about, is there something around how you invite someone into a breakout room that where you figured out some nuance of the invitation or something to increase a conversion rate? If they show up and they're kind of surprised that you're inviting them into a breakout room, was there something you learned along the way in terms of improving how many people want to participate in that way?
I definitely think it's a work in progress, but I would say we promote it in advance so people are aware of that opportunity. And hopefully not just being surprised and having to kind of mentally adjust, like, oh, shoot, I didn't do my hair today, or my background's a mess. Like, so, giving people the opportunity to plan for that opportunity, I think is important. And then also, that's kind of part of why we have topics so that people can have some kind of idea of the value they're getting. And I would say, actually, something that helps make a breakout sticky is to make sure your presenters from the session are included. So
Mm.
we're not just swapping out people that they haven't met and seen and started to learn from. We may bring in additional speakers to enrich that conversation, but it's important that the original presenters from your main presentation continue on to the end of the webinar and are there. And then that's where that connection keeps running.
And are those breakouts parsed by topic?
Yes.
Did I catch that?
Yep,
Okay.
they're parsed by topic, and then I'll list out who the discussion leaders are. So, what panelist or additional subject matter expert.
Yeah. And that makes sense because it's like, oh, whatever, for whatever reason, I related to what Kyla said. Therefore, I want to show up in her session and ask her a follow-up question. That makes a lot of sense.
And does
Two
it become a
questions.
tiny bit of a popularity contest? Maybe, but so far it's still gone well.
Two questions, and we'll get you on with your day. You have, I think you're in a unique place in that you have both outsourced event production in terms of working with a vendor to take a bunch of stuff off your plate, and you've done it yourself. And to me, obviously we fit one of those categories, but we're not here to talk about us. The question for you on behalf of our viewers is, was there some part of either how you're doing it up till now or how you think about it going forward as you grow and scale? Is there some part of that experience or learning that you've had that you could pass along to someone going, build buy? Do I build it in-house? Should I outsource the stuff that is not core of our core competency? Curious.
It's
Just
a great
curious.
question. Yeah, I think it really just depends on what are your strengths and what is your budget and timeline,
Yeah.
and then you kind of move around those levers and make the pieces fit. So it's like if I have the time to do everything and I have the ability to do everything and it meets the goals I'm working toward, then that can make sense. If all of a sudden I need a webinar in 2 weeks and hi, I'm one person, you're probably going to need extra help, even if you technically have the ability to do everything. So
Right.
that's a great moment to again check the ego and move into that partnership opportunity.
That's a good word. Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, people outsource to professional services firms because they can't do something or they don't want to do something. It doesn't make sense for them to do something.
Yeah.
And, unlike decades ago, webinar software is easier to use than ever. But sometimes for the sake of either scaling or I want to focus on things that are more strategic and we can outsource that part of the process or program. And to me, it's not a right or a wrong. I mean, when it's the right fit, it's a right fit. And when it's not, it's not. And as a past client of V2 that I didn't even know till we were here, that's a useful bit of insight. Last question for you. Are there any other questions I should have asked you that I haven't? What question
Hmm.
would you love to have been asked that I haven't asked you? The name
The
of your dog.
journalist in my heart loves this question because you know that the end of an interview always gives you a good nugget. And so, love that. And I would say what's on my mind is that I also consider a key part of my job to be building relationships. So I had a call this morning with a new director that we have on staff, and they're pioneering a new role at our company. And I'm just like curious, I'm like, tell me about you. Tell me about what you do. What problems are you going to fix? Hey, like if you find something cool that could be a resource that would help people, do you want to be part of a content making process? To what degree? Like, do you want to just float us the idea and we'll make it? Do you want to be part of making the thing? And so you can't wait until the moment you're putting together a webinar and be like, who would be a good speaker for this? Maybe I should start meeting people at my company now or interacting with thought leaders in my space. That's not the moment. Like, I'm sure production timelines for webinars usually move pretty fast. And you also generally need backups. People get sick, especially in this day and age. We have to keep that in mind. Things happen with the weather, even people losing connections to internet. And so, if you can be really well networked, and obviously not just for the purpose of like checking boxes and saving the day and being a hero, but because of the value that brings, then I think that's really important to prioritize.
Mm, that is a great closing word. Tell us how to get in touch with you, vendor. Is there a preferred way to connect with you, LinkedIn or something like that?
Yeah, I'm really a LinkedIn kind of gal. Love it. I've been sharing out a couple different posts. My most recent you'll see is about the importance of a person-centered event. So Lauren R. Sawyer on LinkedIn. And for vendor, you've got it here on the screen, vendor.com. That's where we're at.
Lauren, thank you for investing a little time with us today. On behalf of our audience, and seriously, you're welcome back anytime. And if that next time down
Thank
the
you.
road you go, I just had a new insight, let's talk about it. That's having a cup of coffee and chatting about this kind of stuff is exactly what we're all about. For the rest of you, we will thank you for being here and welcome you to the next episode of V2's Thought Leader Conversation Series when we get there. Have a great day.